Have you ever wondered what the Bible really says about divorce and remarriage? I mean, it's a topic that has been clouded by just centuries of tradition and a whole lot of confusion. So today, we're going to cut through all that noise and get to the unfiltered black and white truth found right there in the original texts.
This whole entire issue really boils down to this one single question. It seems like a contradiction, doesn't it? On one hand, Moses permitted divorce, but then Yeshua comes along and says, hey, that wasn't God's original plan. Understanding this is the absolute key to everything else. So let's figure it out. All right, here's our roadmap for getting to the bottom of this. First, we're going to look at the huge difference between what God, who we'll be calling by his Hebrew name Yahuwah, intended for marriage, and what Moses simply allowed. Then, we'll dive right into the original Hebrew, see how Yeshua brought everything back to the original standard, and unpack the single most important Greek word in this entire debate. And finally, we'll see what the New Testament says about the marriage covenant to get to a really clear conclusion.
Okay, to start off, you have to understand that we are dealing with two completely different standards here. There's Yahweh's perfect original blueprint for marriage, and then there's this temporary rule that was put in place to deal with, well, a very imperfect world. And, Yahshua himself makes this distinction crystal clear. He says what Moses permitted was just a concession. It was a response to people's stubbornness, their hard hearts. It was not a reflection of the Father's perfect will. And the most important part of that whole sentence is when he says, but from the beginning it was not so. He's pointing all of us back to the way things were always supposed to be.
So this really helps us see the difference. Over on the left, you've got Yahshua's original plan. Two people, they become one flesh in a lifelong commitment that is not supposed to be broken. But then on the right, you have Moses' rule. And it wasn't a command to divorce, but a way to manage the fallout in a broken society. It wasn't an endorsement of divorce at all. It was just damage control. And confusing these two ideas, that's where so much of the misunderstanding comes from.
So, let's zoom in and take a closer look at that rule from Moses in Deuteronomy 24. This is the only place he talks directly about divorce, so getting the original Hebrew right is absolutely critical. We're about to see the real reason for this regulation.
Now, to really get this, you gotta picture the world Moses was living in. He wasn't trying to make divorce easier, he was actually trying to protect women. See, at that time, men were just kicking their wives out on the street, leaving them with zero legal rights and no way to support themselves. It was a mess.
So, Moses intervenes. The reason he gives for allowing a certificate of divorce is this Hebrew phrase, ervat davar. Now that literally means a matter of nakedness or shameful exposure. It's some kind of sexual misconduct. But here's the absolute key. It's something less than adultery.
So how can we be so sure that ervat davar doesn't mean adultery? Well, it's simple. Because the law of Moses is incredibly clear. The punishment for adultery wasn't divorce, it was death. You wouldn't hand a divorce certificate to someone who is about to be executed. So whatever this passage is talking about, it is not about what we typically call cheating.
Okay, now let's jump ahead to the 1st century. The religious leaders at the time, they had taken this protective rule from Moses and twisted it into a loophole for easy divorce. So, Yahshua steps onto the scene, he cuts through all their man-made traditions, and he takes everybody right back to square one.
And this is his definitive answer. He doesn't just tweak Moses' rule, he completely overrides it by going all the way back to Yahweh's original design for marriage from creation. What he's saying is, if God is the one who joins two people together, no human being has the authority to split them apart, period.
We have to remember what the Pharisees were actually asking him. They wanted to know, hey, can we divorce our wives for just any reason? They were looking for an excuse, a loophole to get divorced. Yahshua's answer was a firm, solid no. He wasn't talking about whether or not you can get remarried. He was shutting down the whole idea of easy divorce in the first place.
Okay, now we get to the part that has caused so much debate. The famous exception clause. When Yahushua says, except for porneia, what in the world did he actually mean? Let's unpack this crucial Greek word.
This is where we really have to pay close attention. There are two totally different Greek words here. You have moikia, which means adultery, cheating that happens inside a valid marriage. But that's not the word Yahushua uses. He uses the word porneia, which in a Jewish context meant something completely different. It was about unions that were forbidden from the very beginning, like incest. In God's eyes, these were never real marriages, so they had to be dissolved.
So what exactly does porneia cover? Well, we're talking about things like marrying a close blood relative, things that were explicitly forbidden in the book of Leviticus. According to the law, these weren't valid marriages that could be ended by divorce. No, they were illegal unions that had to be dissolved. This is the one and only exception Yahusha gives.
Okay, so porneia is all about dissolving an illegal union. But what about a real, valid marriage? Let's see what the New Testament has to say about just how long that commitment is supposed to last.
The Apostle Paul is incredibly direct about this. I mean, he writes that a woman is bound to her husband for as long as he is alive. And if she marries someone else while he's still living, well, she's called an adulteress. It's a pretty powerful and straightforward statement.
So here's how the marriage covenant works according to the New Testament. It's simple. Two people get married, they become one, they are bound together for life. The only thing that breaks that bond is death. And only after a spouse dies is the survivor then free to remarry. It's a very clear sequence.
Look, when you put all the relevant passages together, the message is just consistent. For a valid marriage, remarriage while your first spouse is still alive is considered adultery. The New Testament is unanimous on this. There are no loopholes, there are no exceptions.
So let's put it all together now. We've seen the difference between what Moses allowed and what Yahweh always intended. We've looked at the original meaning of the key Hebrew and Greek words. So what's the bottom line here?
Here it is, the unfiltered truth we've uncovered. Moses' rule was a temporary fix, not Yahuwah's ideal. The exception clause, that word porneia, is about ending an illegal union, not getting divorced because of adultery. Even a serious sin like adultery doesn't break the marriage bond. For a real marriage, that bond is only broken by death, and that means getting remarried while your spouse is still alive is considered adultery. The only kind of divorce the New Testament allows for is dissolving a marriage that was never valid in the first place.
So, there you have it. That's the unfiltered biblical standard as found in the original texts. It's definitely a challenging conclusion, and it leaves us with a really serious question to think about. If this is Yahuwah's unchanging standard for marriage, what does that mean for us today? And what is the right path forward for anyone whose life doesn't align with it?